Ask anyone who knows me well, and they will tell you that I absolutely love the films of Christopher Nolan. For me, he is one of only a small handful of filmmakers whose movies I can watch over and over and over again without ever getting bored or growing tired of them. I consider Nolan to already be firmly ensconced in the pantheon of all-time greatest filmmakers who have ever lived. He is one of those extremely rare filmmaking talents who consistently tells great stories with visual excellence, a true filmmaker, if you will, who embraces the full scope of the cinematic medium to create works of great mythology that are also works of great visual artistry. Nolan is a filmmaker's filmmaker, the kind of artist that other artists admire and aspire to be like. In fact, I would happily pay full cinema pricing to see a movie I have never seen before based solely on the fact that it's a Christopher Nolan film. Regular watchers of my channel will also know that for a long time now I have been telling anyone who will listen that Nolan should be allowed to create a new Star Wars trilogy and a new Bond film, and that he should be given carte blanche to do whatever he believes is best on both projects. He really is that good. Which brings me to the topic of this video, Christopher Nolan's 2010 film Inception, a movie that many people seem to consider his second greatest work after his truly stunning and unparalleled 2008 film The Dark Knight. I really love Inception. Not only is the story unique, but it also manages to convincingly pull off a grand and intricately complex level of storytelling on a fantastical scale without ever once leaving us, the audience, scoffing in disbelief. The fact that we just unquestioningly accept such a grand and elaborate fiction is testament to Nolan's filmmaking prowess. What's also amazing is that this movie manages to take what would normally be a relatively bland science fiction-y type concept, that of entering someone else's mind and planting an idea in their head, and then turns it into one of the greatest action-adventure films ever made. That is no mean feat, and it speaks to the depth of storytelling creativity in this film. This is also a movie that surrounds the main protagonist with an ensemble cast and then uses that cast in a near-perfect way, with each character seamlessly playing their part in the development of the story. One character who I have come to consider a perfectly inspired casting choice is that of Ariadne, played by Ellen Page. Initially I thought it was a bit of an odd decision to cast Page in this role, but the more I have watched this film, the more I have come to recognise the genius of it. Her character needs to be a foil to the aggressive self-confidence and at times braggadocio of the main protagonist Cobb, played by Leonardo DiCaprio. To do this, she needs to be younger. She needs to perfectly embody the presence of a typical university student studying some form of science or engineering. She needs to be too inexperienced to have hubris, and she also needs to have a certain naivety about the world and the Inception scheme that she has been drawn into. On top of that, she also needs to have moments of genuine childlike innocence that challenge the hard-edged, cynical brokenness that is the hallmark of Cobb. Lastly, she also needs to have a confidence that allows her various moments where she is able to match wits with Cobb, but not to such a degree that she usurps his role as the central focus of the story. What better actor to fit that bill than Ellen Page? Interestingly, in Greek mythology, the name Ariadne is most associated with labyrinths and mazes, as she is the one who provides Theseus with the tools he needs to kill and then escape from the maze of the Minotaur. This obvious parallel to the character of Ariadne in Inception, who designs the dream mazes and also assists Cobb to escape them, got me curious about the names of the other characters in Inception. My research yielded some fascinating results. Firstly, the name of the main protagonist, Cobb, is short for Jacob, which means supplanter, because in the Jewish and Christian scriptures, he deprived his older brother Esau of the rights he was entitled to as the firstborn son. Just think about that for a moment. The meaning of Cobb's name is the same as the central premise of Inception. Saito hires Cobb to trick Robert Fisher, who is a firstborn son, thus depriving Robert Fisher, the firstborn son, of his right to inherit the company as his father had intended. Speaking of Saito, according to my investigations into his name, there are 18 different two-character variations of the kanji characters that can be used for the meaning of the name Saito. In effect, there are 18 different possible meanings for the name Saito, and so the meaning all depends on which two kanji characters are chosen to create your version of that name. And here's the interesting bit. In one of these 18 variations, the first kanji character means govern, the second kanji character means climb. It seems to me that these are the two most perfect descriptors for the character of Saito in this story. Firstly, he's the character who governs a major global corporation, as well as governing the team he has hired to carry out the Inception in Inception, and he then becomes the character who must climb out of limbo in order to escape death. Then there is Yusuf, whose name means God will increase in Arabic, which is exactly what Yusuf does in the story of Inception. He increases the stability of the dream state, thus increasing the ability to dream, and he increases the amount of time each person can exist in the world of dreams. This makes him identical to the God of Christian theism, who holds the existence of every creature and the very world we inhabit in being. Yusuf is literally like the God who increases for the characters in this story. And one couldn't make a video about Inception without mentioning the musical brilliance of the score by Hans Zimmer. The partnership of Nolan and Zimmer has produced some of the most memorable musical moments of modern cinema. But what makes this one particularly special is the subtle yet powerful use of shifting musical timings to complement the shifting of time that happens in each dream layer in this story. And that's to say nothing of the use of very pronounced and driving rhythms as a musical invocation to remind us of the constant and rhythmic ticking of a clock, which is obviously the ultimate symbol of time. Now, while all of that is interesting, what I really love about Inception are the layers of deeper meaning embedded within its story. This is an area where Nolan really excels in his filmmaking, seeding deep and profoundly important themes into what would otherwise be very simple and straightforward plots. This is why a Christopher Nolan action film is never just an action film. There's always something deeper and more important going on beneath its rowdy surface. And if you'll pardon the unintentional poetry, Inception is no exception. One of the big questions about Inception that has sparked various internet conjecture over the past decade is whether or not the events in the story are real or simply the fictional creations of the subconscious mind of Leonardo DiCaprio's character Cobb. A lot of keystrokes and verbiage have been dedicated to this aspect of Inception, so I won't relitigate the issue here. For what it's worth though, while I think there are some fascinating points made by subscribers to the "it was all a dream" theory, I ultimately accept the film at face value as being real rather than the imaginings of the dreaming mind of a sedated Cobb. I have only grown more resolute in this belief since hearing Michael Caine tell an audience the following back in 2018. When I got the script of Inception, I was a bit puzzled by it, and I said to him, Christopher Nolan, "I don't understand where the dream is." I said, "When is it the dream and when is it reality?" Michael Caine then goes on to say that Nolan told him, "Well, when you're in the scene, it's reality." He then finishes by telling the audience, "So get that? If I'm in it, it's reality. If I'm not in it, it's the dream." Either way, this is irrelevant to the deeper meaning that I want to explore in this video, in which I have so far heard very little discussion about. It seems to me that at its heart, Inception is actually a story about depression, guilt, and regret. The theme of regret is strong throughout the film. In fact, the very song that is used to signal the kick when characters are in the dream state is, and forgive my poor French pronunciation here, Non je ne regrette rien by Edith Piaf. On another fascinating side note, the actress who played Cobb's wife in Inception, Marion Cotillard, also played Edith Piaf in the 2007 biopic film about the life of Edith Piaf called La Vie en Rose. Spooky. Now back to the song. The title Non je ne regrette rien literally translates to No, I regret nothing. It is only 12 minutes into the film when we first hear that song about regret, and then it continues to repeat over and over and over again throughout the rest of the story. And just listen to the lyrics of the third verse. With my memories, I light the fire, my pains, my pleasures. I don't need them anymore. I'm done with the loves and all their troubles. I'm done forever. I start over with nothing. That verse is a perfect description of the pathos that haunts Cobb, the main protagonist in Inception. He is a man plagued by regrets. In fact, what Cobb carries around with him isn't simply deep regret, it is actually a seemingly insurmountable burden of guilt that literally threatens to destroy him. And he's not the only one bound up in such brokenness. Robert Fisher is also consumed by a profound sense of guilt about having failed his father. Even though Fisher's burden is one that has been cruelly and unjustly inflicted upon him by his dad, it is still a destructive millstone around his neck nonetheless. It seems to me that there are actually two Inceptions in the film Inception, and that both of them involve freeing people from guilt and regret. The first Inception frees Robert Fisher from the guilt that his father has unfairly yoked him with, and the second Inception happens when Cobb finally chooses to let go and find freedom from guilt over the death of his wife. It's also interesting to note that the symbolism of the cleansing waters of baptism is associated with both Inceptions. After his inception, Robert Fisher arises from the submerged van, cleansed and renewed by the waters, while Cobb arises cleansed and renewed from the pounding ocean waters in the world of limbo after his inception. Another fascinating thing that struck me about the final act of Inception is that there is also a sort of penance and restitution that is required of Cobb before he can be truly free. It's not simply enough to let go of the guilt about Mal, he then also has to complete his redemption by saving Saito from the very world that previously consumed his wife. Speaking of Mal, it seems to me that one of the most powerful yet underrated themes in Inception is that of depression, and that her character embodies this form of suffering in a way that is profoundly real. Just think about it for a moment. She is a character who has lost sight of what is real, and nothing can heal the wound which has been inflicted within her. She no longer sees the good in the world, not even the profound good of her own family and the deep love they have for her. She cannot be convinced by anyone or anything that her mind is deceiving her. For Mal, the absence of the good is the evil that afflicts her, and she can see no way to end this nightmare. This culminates in the tragic events that unfold in the hotel room after she comes to embrace the lie that the only way to be freed from this burden is to no longer exist in the world. Although the film makes no reference to the deeper implications of Mal's plight, it seems to me that even if Cobb had taken her back to the dream world before the hotel incident, her burden would still not have been relieved. Her rejection of the world around her began in that very dream world, remember? So why would it suddenly stop being an issue if she was then returned to the very same place where she had first become confused about what is good, true and beautiful, and what is simply a deception? This is what makes the inception and suffering of Mal such a perfect metaphor for depression. Just like her inception, depression is not something that you can simply tell someone to snap out of. Her mind is the prison. It is the inescapable black dog which haunts her every waking moment, and which she is no longer capable of fleeing from because the one tool necessary for her to find her freedom has been lost to her. It seems to me that there is also a subtle warning embedded in Inception about the potential for self-destruction that awaits us if we give ourselves over to self-gratification instead of seeking to live a life of virtue and self-giving. Just consider what led up to the crisis that would eventually break Mal. Her and Cobb had become addicted to the pleasure and seeming power offered to them by the dream state. It had become their drug of choice, their place of self-gratification. The story of Cobb and Mal echoes that of Icarus and his father Daedalus. Just like Cobb, Daedalus was a master architect who created a labyrinth which he was then subsequently imprisoned in. Both Cobb and Daedalus were men who were enslaved by their own creations. Mal is the parallel of Daedalus' son Icarus, who is also imprisoned in the labyrinth with his father until Daedalus conceives of a plan to escape the world he has designed by using wings made of feathers and wax that he created. And just like Mal, the life of Icarus ends in tragedy when he flies too close to the sun and his wings melt, causing him to plunge to his death, again, just as Mal does in Inception. Just like Daedalus, Cobb is then left to deal with a huge burden of grief and the knowledge that he bears the ultimate responsibility for the death of the one he loved more than anything else in the world. I don't think it's mere coincidence that Cobb conflates himself with the act of Inception when at one point in the film he declares, "Listen, there's something you should know about me, about Inception." Did you notice that? He is conflating himself there with Inception. He then goes on to say, an idea is like a virus, resilient, highly contagious. The smallest seed of an idea can grow. It can grow to define or destroy you. There is a lot more that could be said about Inception, but I'll just finish where I started by saying that I think it is one of Christopher Nolan's best films. I know that a lot of people consider it to be Nolan's second best work after The Dark Knight, but for me, I think they are both first equal. The Dark Knight has a greater depth in its characterizations, but Inception is an original story that boasts a stunningly intricate level of mythological craftsmanship. So for me, there is no clear winner in the contest between these two truly great films. The beautiful irony with Inception, though, is that just like its main protagonist Cobb, Nolan proved to us with the creation of this film that he is an unparalleled architect of stunningly grand fantasy worlds. Fantasy worlds which seem unquestionably real while we are caught up in them, and which we always want to revisit once the dream is over. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a tip in the tip jar by using the PayPal link found in the description below. If that doesn't work, use the PayPal button that's found at the top right of my YouTube channel's homepage. And as per usual, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so please let me know what you think in the comment section below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time on Left Foot Media.